Welcome to the STABcast, a podcast dedicated to Star Wars Legion.
Goodbye, old friend. May the Force be with you.
Welcome, Cadets and Commanders, to the STABcast, the Sunsphere Tactical Attack Brigade's Legion podcast. I am Will, Revenge of the Sith Heim, with Ben, Attack of the Clones Fowler, and Ryan, the Phantom Menace Slowoski. How are we doing today, gentlemen?
I'm doing great. How about you guys?
I can't complain. Got to play some Legion. This week on STABcast, battle reports from our tournament at Dicehead Games, a look at building your local gaming communities, and much, much more.
So yeah, we were down at Dicehead, a store we love to go down to in Chattanooga. Always great setups, great terrain. Just a great setup in general. Ben, how was your round one?
Oh, round one was tough, just to be honest with you guys. It was a podcast showdown. In the random matches, it's me and Ryan Slowoski. And you know there can only be one winner. And Ryan and I have played lots of games with each other. Sometimes he wins, sometimes I win.
Hold on. We actually haven't gotten to play that much Legion with each other.
No, we haven't. But you and I play lots of other games together.
Yeah, we play lots of other games, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Sometimes I win, sometimes Ryan wins. And well, let's go and spoil it. Ryan did not win this one. Oh, Salt was everywhere towards the end. It was a salty game. So at Dicehead, the entire room is playing the exact same event, or exact same battle cards. So everyone is playing Reinforce, Recover Supplies, and Major Offensive. I'm playing the Slowoski special against Slowoski. So Ryan, what were you playing?
Yeah, I was testing out a bunch of new tech. I had Leia, I had Han, I had Commandos on the table. I was running 2 of the 4-man commando teams with the sniper upgrade, just paying for the extra body, and the Pierce keyword is really all I was looking for. Then my standard setup of troopers, and it was kind of the Slowoski special, just with the 2 ATRTs taken out and putting 2 commando squads pretty much pound for pound in their place. And then a few extra upgrades smattered around for the cost of Luke to Han, since I had Han instead of Luke. So yeah, it was a cool little list.
I was originally going to play with the Commandos, but I didn't get them painted in time. So I felt kind of bad about that. I had talked about flying a T-47, but when we got to Dicehead, it looked like it was going to be just me, Ryan, Will, Brett, and then our buddy Scott showed up. And I was like, whoa, I can't play T-47 list against these people. Now the podcast would be nothing but look at how Ben failed with that T-47. So,
yep.
My version of the Slowoski special, I like having the rotary cannon. I like the range that it gives me. But that's the only real difference I think we put into it. Interesting graveyard map. The thing we love about Dicehead is the terrain. The tables it had us playing on initially was a lot of terrain. We spent a healthy amount of time kind of trimming it down to be Legion sized. And we've talked on this podcast plenty of times about just the right amount. And so we cleaned that board up, but it was an interesting board. It was a graveyard map. So lots of stone, lots of mausoleums, like gates to hide behind, wrought iron kind of things. It was a nice looking map. And I will say, I failed on my job. I did not take anywhere near enough photos. So the Instagram is going to look a little light on this one. Round 2, as we get into this, I put 4 or 5 different shots into these the Rebel snipers. And Ryan can't draw that sniper token to save his life. And I wipe them off the board before it can activate.
How many blocks did I roll?
The number would be 0.
Yeah, that was 0. Yep.
You're going to hear it a lot in this conversation. I rolled a few crits, just a few to make sure I got through what little cover there was. I kind of messed up. I displaced my own Leia. It had to do with where the board was. I needed her to be in a place that she could give out dodge tokens, and then my ATRT had to be able to move through it because there's some nice terrain river that was kind of running through. It was going to slow me down. And so Ryan, of course, displaces her as far away as he can from all the action. So she's kind of out of it for just a couple of rounds here. In the middle of the board is we've got one of our objective tokens to recover that supply. My Flamer ATRT starts marching towards it, and it's in just the right place that I have to waste 2 actions moving forward to get past it, but then I can't shoot, and I'm moving into Ryan's grenade tossers, and they definitely want a piece of my flaming ATRT. So I just stop short. I just sit there, and I'm like, come at me, bro. So Ryan, you came at me. What happened?
I took a move action to get in that range 1. Pulled back my impact grenades to throw at his ATRT, and I rolled 1 hit.
1 hit. And then I think I dodged it. I think I blocked it.
Yes, you did block it. Yeah, that was salt in the wound. Yep.
Yeah, I blocked that one hard too. It's like, okay. So naturally, I do what Flamer ATRTs do. I then set them all on fire, just lit them right up. So Ryan has a second team come in for another set of grenades. They've pulled the pins. Ryan, what happened?
I rolled one hit. You didn't block that one. Yeah, that one went through. I'll show that ATRT.
So in the next round, I did exactly what you do, and I lit those guys on fire.
This is around the time I heard the shouting from the next table.
No, the shouting didn't happen long before that. Ben's leaving out a few details, but I'll cover those, catch those up.
I have my fleet troopers kind of sit on the activation tokens that we can. We fight over the one in the center. We fight hard over that one.
Hold on. We did not fight over the one in the middle. You never got it. It was mine.
Well, no, I knocked it off the guy at the very end. You didn't pick it up until like round 5. See, the salt is already regenerating.
Yeah, but you didn't have it either. It ended the game on the game on the table.
The ATRT, my own ATRT was kind of in the way, and then the only group of troopers I had moving towards it, what I call my Gideon group, because I use Gideon for my A's, my commander. Ryan just shot to pieces, so they died before they could touch that box. Luke and my Verena squad, they're going behind the big mausoleum on the map. They're going to try to take out the sniper squad on the other side, because I can't afford to have snipers just shoot me from anywhere on the map. It gets into a rough tangle of some places. Luke kills just enough to not be able to get shot at. And then, of course, we clean that up a couple rounds later. I rolled quite a few crits on that side, too. I rolled quite a few crits. On some Z6s, it's always fun when you have more white crits than you do black crits. That was definitely a thing that happened. And so it just devolved from there.
Yeah, me and Ben digesting the game after. The thing Ben failed to mention is in the middle of the map where I kind of made Ben played a lot on the edges of the map, and I kind of put a concerted effort into the middle. Ben won the middle because he threw crits. Like, all the cover I had, all the things I got to do, there were several times I couldn't spend my dodge tokens because Ben threw nothing but crits. It was a very big dice variance game. I know a few places I made a few mistakes, but it's one of those losses, and I don't want to just sound like salty, that I don't know that I could have done anything about. Like, even when Ben's dice failed, they failed for him. Like Luke not getting 4 hits to wipe out a group of troopers so that I can shoot him while his force push was on exhausted. It was literally he rolls the 3 hits, kills the 3 guys, and then there's 1 guy left, so I can't engage. Everything that could have gone against me kind of did. And I did make a few mistakes with, I played No Time for Sorrows, turn 1, which I probably shouldn't have, and a few other things. But yeah, my dice just couldn't go my way. I got to rapid reinforce some fleet troopers into some great places, and then their dice just, I think they threw 3 hits, unobstructed, no cover shot, into your fleet troopers when they should have wiped a squad and kind of taken control of that flank. Yeah, anything that could have gone wrong did. It was a fun game. The map was pretty cool. It took us about 45 minutes to get all the tables set because they were loaded for, I think, some form of Warhammer, which required a lot more terrain. So we had to spend some time paring those boards down. But it was a fun game. It was a frustrating game to be sure. But you know what? You gotta get those games out. They're gonna happen. The variance is gonna hit there. Can't beat Ben up too much, otherwise he'll quit playing. So it was a fun game. And I'm an emotional player, so like the emotion, both the highs and the lows, is part of the fun for me. So when I'm getting really upset, it's not necessarily always a bad thing. It's just because I enjoy the game so much that I kind of let it get to me. I let it bother me. And I was never at any point mad at Ben because once again, it was dice. Neither one of us can control that. And that doesn't also make Ben's win not legitimate. It was a good game. It was a fun game.
Yeah, we know it's just dice. We looked at it, I was like, oh man, I'm sorry. I hate to do that to you. It's a thing that just happened because we can't control it once the dice hit the table. So
yeah, and I mean, I think we both sat down at the end of the game, even though it was a pretty one-sided game, and we looked at where we could, because we got done before everybody else. We looked at where our mistakes were, where we could have learned from, and we probably both made the same number of mistakes. And so it was a good game. I had a lot of fun. Will, how did your round Uno go?
Well, I was playing against Brett, who's possibly still an enemy of the podcast. We'll consult Ben about that later. On this cool-looking map, but it turned out to be pretty difficult to play on. it was this cool, like, industrial zone with this giant sprawling catwalk thing with ladders and levels and pipes everywhere. But really, it just made playing kind of a pain. I was at a real disadvantage on the map anyway because of all this crazy terrain, and Brett's using all these rebels with sharpshooter, and he's just picking off my units one by one. Like Ben mentioned, we were all playing the same setup, so it was recover the supplies, major offensive, and rapid reinforcements. It wasn't going my way from the start, and it just got worse. I had a few turns I was doing okay, like my bikes kind of flew over and almost killed Leia, but then she was on 1 health and hid behind heavy cover the rest of the game. And then all these sniper teams just picking off units.
At one point, Will was like, "Oh, guys, you should really see how terrible this is." But Ryan and I, of course, were in the middle of our death match, and so we were not able to respond or watch.
I didn't even recognize that Will had spoken to me.
Oh yeah, there were a few times I tried to get y'all's attention, and the only time I got you to even look at me, you just stared at me with like the dice hate in your eyes that I'd seen from previous games.
From the X-Wing days.
Oh yes. By the end of the game, I had this ATST who ended up just having nowhere to go because there was this massive obstructing terrain cover in the middle, and I didn't want to spend 3 rounds backing up. By the end of the game, Han Solo's just kind of sitting there behind the ATST, like shooting it in the back and then picking off trooper units. And then because Brett is a terrible little gremlin that doesn't let you concede, he made me play all 6 rounds. And by the end, I had lost the game 2-0 and had almost been wiped off the board. So it was not a good showing for me.
So there end up being 8 players at this tournament. By the time everyone shows up and everything kind of gets settled down, and because of the pairing system, the STABcast ended up playing mostly the STABcast. There was 2 other gentlemen that I had not met. They seemed really nice guys. We shook hands, we talked, but I didn't get to play them. So since Brett won and I won, and the other gentleman who also had won his game, in the pairings, I pull Brett. So now it's a Sunsphere, Central versus Sunsphere South kind of game. And I will tell you, he's still very much an enemy of the podcast. This round, the entire room is playing advanced positions, breakthrough, and limited visibility. Brett is playing, like Will said, he's got all these sniper teams. He's got fleet troopers. He's got Leia. He's got Han. And it's just sharpshooter madness everywhere. So Brett puts his troops all across his L. He's got some in the center of the board, some on his far edge. I concentrate all my forces in the dead center because I'm going to rush, towards his side, both in the middle and towards his far edge, and then try to kill anything that makes its way across that terrain. Because of some great line of sight blocking terrain in the middle that isn't very tall, it's tall enough to block line of sight, but not tall enough for a certain Luke Skywalker to leap over, and advanced positions, and me playing No Time for Sorrow on round 1, Luke manages to charge into a group of fleet troopers on round 1, and I just murder them. I think I kill everyone but one guy because I didn't have a name token, which is, again, one of the dice helped me out really well right there. And it's just gross. On turn 1, I've nearly knocked out an entire activation. His sniper commandos slip past Luke. They run towards his deployment zone, where they will harass me for the rest of this game. All they do is just shoot that sniper gun at range 1 to infinity, just knocking troops down left and right, adding suppression tokens. I try to bait him into some standby. Like I'll put a trooper out there at range 2 or just outside of range 2, throw a standby token, and then trying to come at me. And of course he refuses. And then Brett makes one mistake that really does, I don't know if it costs him the game, but it flips it hard against him. He moves into range 2, but he thinks he's outside of it because he measures to a model that's not my commander. And he takes a standby token rather than shooting at me. He just didn't quite look to the right where my actual leader commander was, because he was just enough into range 2. And so he takes a standby and a dodge token. And then, of course, the standby doesn't work because I don't have to have an action. I can just shoot him from right there. So, and I didn't take an aim, so I get the shot off. And it was quite gross. And I nearly wipe out that squad too. So now both his fleet troopers are decimated very early in the setup. Yeah, they get decimated hard. I didn't quite break Brett's spirit right there, but it was gross. And again, this is round 1 of shooting. This is all round 1. I clipped that T right off of Brett's last name there. I solidly cleaned up all the troops. Final round, I'm trying to put my last squad across the line. All it has is a unit leader in a Z6. Is actually Gideon again. Is Gideon and Z6 are running. and he just throws that sniper rifle from all the way across town. And next thing I know, I have not rolled a block, and both of them die. It ends up costing me a victory point, and the way the tournament was run, that victory point means I didn't get first place. I came in second. So since Will, I believe, has declared Brett an enemy of the podcast, and I have declared Brett an enemy of the podcast, yeah, we're going to upgrade Brett. Brett is now an arch enemy of the podcast. Boo to Brett. Boo. May his downfall be swift. Boo.
Brett, you're all right in my book, buddy. So I also got to play another Knoxville fellow. We had our friend Scott come down for this event. I got to play him round 2 on the weird catwalk board that Will got to play round 1 on. And man, is that thing a struggle to play on. It looks fantastic. But like to move all your models and do cohesion under these catwalks and move up the ladders and stuff, especially with like an ATRT, which is awkward enough to be able to like barely fit underneath. But the fact that it can fit means that, well, you kind of got to put it under there now. It was just kind of a hot mess. So I was playing Scott, good friend, longtime friend of ours, played X-Wing. We've known him for a lot of years. And it was his first time bringing out his Rebel army. He had just been putting in the hours painting them. They looked fantastic. It was kind of funny that they were like this cool camo-y green color, and then we're playing like this industrial map where everything is like black and red. So neither one of our armies really fit, but Scott's army looked great. And I could tell that he had been playing a lot as the Empire. He kind of played his troops very aggressively, relying on that red defense die that he all of a sudden didn't have.
It's a hard switch up as a guy who plays both armies. It is a different mindset that you have to throw yourself into. Because, yeah, thinking, oh, yeah, I can easily dodge out of that with my red dice. Oh, these guys don't have it. Or, hey, I took that dodge token. I don't get it back because these guys don't have nimble. Switching between armies, it's difficult. I've lost some games because I played it wrong because I was thinking I was playing the other guys.
The other thing that didn't help him out is I kind of boxed his Luke in the middle of the table with the way advanced position works and the way we kind of deployed and scouted. He put all of his units kind of in one arm of the L with his ATRTs on the other wing. And then I kind of had a more balanced approach between stacking all of my units in the 2 points of the L for breakthrough because it's the shortest amount of real estate you have to cross. So I kind of got his Luke surrounded, and I think I got him off the board during the 4th turn before he had activated, so we only really got to use Luke 3 times, and he never managed to get him into melee. He kept getting pushed and pulled in other directions where he was needed for whether it be a command card or for a force power or whatever. So I got his Luke early, and then it kind of spiraled down from there. I did have like my dice picked up. I had a couple really killer rolls. My fleet troopers got into some pretty good positions. And then this time when they rolled, instead of rolling 3 or 4 hits, I think one of my fleet trooper rolls got 9. They had an aim token, but it was still pretty gross. He finally gets his flamethrower where he needs it to be and shoots his flamethrower off. And the 2 times he got his flamer off, he managed not to kill the full unit. So it was a pretty rough day. Although I will give Scott credit, he did have a commando team with the bombs with the proton charge. He's probably played it the most efficiently that I've seen it. Whenever I try to throw those bombs, they don't really do much of anything. But Scott put his bombs in a couple really nice places to zone me out of some key areas, and then when I needed to move in there, he would set it off, typically getting more than just one unit. And he never bombed himself, which was cool. So kudos to Scott on that. Yeah, it was a fun game. But I think if Scott can get some more experience with the Rebels and a few other dice rolls go his way, he'll be a force to be reckoned with there. But he was playing Rebels a bit too aggressively. But it was a fun game all in all. So I got to go 1-1 on the day playing 2 of my good buddies from Knoxville.
Those proton bombs, I think are going to be interesting. I haven't been able to get them in my head right, so I'm kind of afraid to put them on the table. But it's going to be something there.
Man, I've gotten some great proton bombs like off, but then I roll those dice and it's like 1 hit and they dodge it. So I'm not super impressed with them because you kind of have to hope your opponent makes a mistake and the dice go your way. So we'll see if they get there or not. I think they'll get there once the rebels get access to something like Palpatine, where they can order moves, so they can throw them and then move away or move in and get a little extra utility. Because right now it's super easy to broadcast where you're going to throw a bomb, and it's kind of hard to zone with. I think they'll get there though. They're definitely fun.
So for my round 2, one of the players at the event had brought his young son, and in round 2, since I had lost by the highest margin in the first round, I was paired against the other person who'd lost by the highest margin, which was the young kid. I think he was 8 or 9 years old. So it wasn't really a game. He was having fun moving the models around. He got Veers and 3 squads of troopers to the top level of a 3-story building and said they were having a penthouse party. So it was just kind of relaxing, moving models around. I was stressing out about the Tennessee football game, so it was all working out. The one thing he said he wanted to do at the start of the game was he wanted to kick one of my stormtroopers in the face with his ATST, and he did it. He ran that thing up there, which when an ATST double moves, it's kind of scary seeing it move that quickly.
It's fast.
He rushed that thing up there to a 7-man trooper squad and kicked one right in the face, and I made it so it flew off the table to entertain him. So it was just kind of fun and silly. We only played 4 rounds because, we didn't really need to play more than that. But I was fine to kind of just play around. It was kind of fun, not taking it too seriously. So it was a good time. If it matters, I won 3-0, but, it's not really what that was about.
Sometimes if you just have a goal, you want to accomplish this one thing. Arch enemy of the podcast, Brett, will often do that. He just wanted to play with snipers one time. In our last podcast, we talked about this. And so he was just going to shoot people in the face with snipers. Did he kill Veers? He did. He was happy with that. That was success in his book.
For those parents out there who want to get their kids and bring them to events, I think that's awesome, and I think you should totally do that. The only thing that I would bear in mind is make sure that your kids, when you bring them to a tournament, to an organized play event where you're not going to be with them all of the time, make sure they can play the game by themselves. So that, because we always have to remember that it's not just our entertainment, but we're playing a game with someone else. And I think Will's a better player for this than I, because if that would have been me, if our spots would have been swapped, I wouldn't have been probably quite as patient, and it would have really tried me. So if you bring your kids, I want you to. It'll be awesome. Families playing games together is great, but make sure your kids can operate independently on their own, so that the person that your kids are going to have to play can also enjoy their afternoon. It might not be the most competitive game, but at least to where they're not having to kind of handhold through the turn sequence.
See, Ryan says this, but as a man who's lost many games to those kids who are under the age of 14, and I mean many, I've lost to an entire family of kids who are all from the same people.
Yeah, but those kids knew how to play the game.
They didn't know how to play the game. They did.
Yeah, because they beat you. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of guiding him through like, all right, now it's your turn. So, that's a trooper unit. So that's one of these guys. And then, but I was fine with that.
Sure.
The TO came over and he was thankful that I was patient with him. So it was fine.
But yeah, big shout out to Dicehead. Thanks for an awesome event. It was a free event that they just kind of put on. It was kind of short notice. They had a bunch of guys out in the hallway of the mall playing Warhammer, which was cool. And then we got the nice high-rise tables, so they were being nice to us. Big thanks to Josh and Chad over at Dicehead Games in Cleveland, Tennessee. So if you guys are ever in the East Tennessee area, that's another great store for you guys to check out.
So I also managed to get in a game, or a casual night this week. Played Brandon, who was showing off the game to his buddy Pat. I think Pat's going to buy in hard. Brandon was playing 2 bikes, an ATST, 5 troopers, and Veers. I was playing the 2-man rebel sniper teams because I wanted to see if you could do something with them. Han Solo was my only commander. I had 2 fleets with all the things, 3 rebel troopers with all the things, and then I put a T-47 on the table. I don't know why I did it. Well, that's not true. I know why I did it. I had this cool fancy alt art that I got at Gen Con, and I felt like I had to at least put it on the table once. So I did. We were playing Sabotage the Moisture Evaporator, Disarray, Rapid Reinforcements. We both declined to rapidly reinforce anything. We both had long-range shots. He had DLTs, and he had his ATST with all the weapons. And we just kind of started firing up on each other. It was actually kind of a lot of fun. Disarray with one commander, is super dangerous. We both put troops in the opposite corners, and of course our vehicles, because they don't get suppressed off the table yet. As we were approaching the evaporators, we just lit into each other. We just shot up each other's units. In fact, we were both kind of hard decimated across. By the end of the game, we didn't have a whole lot of units left. Or we did, but there were, one unit per activate, or one model per activation. A unit commander for me, I got to the evaporator. He got suppressed twice. He's the only guy left in it. I managed to rally up and then, fix the moisture evaporator for myself, scoring the only points that we scored that game, because that's how hard we fought over those points.
Shoot, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's insane.
Part of it, I think, is where we place them. Part of it is, like I said, long-range shots were just taking us out. His bikes were decimating my troops on the other side of my disarray. The snipers, who I love, mostly just gave suppression. Didn't always score a hit with them. Something would come up, or they would get the block off. That red die does block quite a bit.
You do know they have Pierce 1, right?
Yes, I know they have Pierce 1, but sometimes you just didn't have any dice to hit. They're just blank.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, that's fair.
And one guy out of a 5-trooper squad didn't do a whole lot of damage to a trooper squad. At one point, I sent off my snipers just to go try to fix some moisture evaporators, and they got shot before they could get there. My T-47 did exactly what T-47s do, which is
nothing.
Roll surges.
Yeah.
Which is fine if you're rolling defensive surges, but I was not. I was rolling offensive surges. And the red dice hit pretty often, but those black dice were blank a lot. And so I was taking aim tokens to try to get back into it. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Had the ground buzzer on the back. I think I only killed 2 people with the ground buzzer. I think I did get a damage in on a bike through a ground buzzer. That T-47, that just doesn't do the things that I wanted to do for the point cost.
Sure doesn't.
So, end of the game, I ended up winning by that single point. He and I had lots of fun. I expect to see him out a lot more in the future. Him and his buddy, as like I said, they're both going to get into the game. So, yeah, I had a great casual night. It was fun.
Yeah, I also got to play against a local miniatures gamer and awesome painter, Chris Hodge. He hasn't come out to too many Legion events. So we played a game. His list had a T-47 in it, a couple commandos, and Han. And it was just kind of a hodgepodge of new stuff that he wanted to try out with a bunch of new experimental upgrade cards. And so we played a pretty quick, casual game of intercept transmissions on advanced positions, I want to say, if I'm remembering correctly, and limited visibility. And so he brought his snow speeder around, and it did a ton of damage. He had double ATRT, so he was a little light on the trooper front, which allowed me to score 2 of the 3 towers in the first segment of intercept transmissions. But by the end of the game, his army was absolutely hammering mine, and I was hemorrhaging units back and forth, but I was managing to keep his trooper units off the point. So even though his army value was way higher than mine, I was getting more of those victory points. So I managed to pull out the win in the end, and me and Chris had a pretty fun casual game. Always good to get out on our Wednesday nights and play.
It's also a nice reminder. This is an objective game, and so got to score them objectives.
Got to score them points. All about them points.
This week, as we look at our start of the game, let's take a look at how turns 1 and 2 play out. What kind of plans do we like to put together when looking down? You've deployed, your objectives are out. Will, what is turn 1 about for you?
For me, turn 1's really about patience. When I started the game, turn 1, especially on things like breakthrough, you're like, all right, we got to start moving. It's turn 1. We only got 6 rounds. But really, with turn 1, you just got to kind of make sure you have solid positions, and a lot of times you just want to make sure you can't be pushed out of your engagements by your opponent moving on turn 1. It's about kind of setting up the next rounds, which, seems obvious, but really you have to think about it a lot more than I think I first realized when I started. If you get out of position or if you're rushing too early, I think your opponent can really take advantage of you.
Yeah, that fear with having, there's only 6 rounds. I only get, these 2 actions per round. I've just got to rush. And I think if you look at the position, for me, it's about launching that major offensive. It's about what am I going to blow up on turn 2? It's about trying to get multiple units in a place where they're not going to get shot at alone, where I can bring them to bear against another single unit to hopefully wipe out some activations. It's about that setup for what's going to come next. Because round 2, I think, is often the round that tends to swing games for me. I don't like to put units out that are going to get shot at by themselves unless it's bait, unless it's in an attempt to draw out my opponent. So for me, turn one, I know that sounds dumb, but it's that setup. It's setting up for, because everything's going to explode after that. For me, that's what happens. So got to get that set up there.
Yeah, turn one, kind of what these guys have said. It's all about setting the pace. I learn a whole lot about my opponent by whatever their turn one command card is. I think that broadcasts a lot about how you want to play the game, because a lot of times your command cards, whatever you play on turn one, you're not going to get the most efficient use out of it. If it's one of the special cards, if it's not like standing orders, assault, push, or ambush. So I think watching what they play turn one will broadcast what they want to do, because it'll remove that card from their hand so they can't use it at a more advantageous time. As a rebel player, it's all about running. I hardly ever take shots turn one, with the exception of Leia and her giant spaceship. That's usually the only shot that I'll take. Or if I'm running a two-man sniper team, they may just stay in place and shoot if I got to deploy them where I want them. And I usually like to set up for my scoring position, because you really want to be able to easily take points if you're playing intercept transmissions on that second turn, to where you can focus on getting into the points and you don't have to burn both of your actions moving and then you get suppressed back. Or it's about setting up a containment. I'm an old StarCraft player and I play Terran, and so I love my siege tank contains. And so it's all about getting my pieces where I need them to kind of put a stranglehold on the game, to box you into the corners that I want you in and setting the pace that way. Rebels want to run to get into place on turn one, where they're going to get least likely to get shot. That way they can just kind of stand there and take dodge tokens and shoot, or pick up boxes as needed. Turn one is all about putting the plan that you have for the rest of the 5 turns into place and trying to get more of that plan in place than your opponent does.
So after you've set up on round 1, you take that turn dial and turn it to round 2. Something I like to say is that turn 2 is kind of the special sauce. It's kind of where the game is determined, I feel like. You put your plans into motion, you try to get your units ready to strike at what your opponent needs to win, and you're probably getting your faster units into engagements like Imperial bikes, or double moving ATRTs are starting to threaten troopers with flamers or rotaries. It's where the game kind of starts to become a war game, whereas before it was more of a pure strategy, thinking about how the plan will go. And then starting with round 2, it becomes a lot more, all right, here's how the plan has not worked. How do we get this back on track? I think turn 2 is a really pivotal turn for objectives and things like that, especially ones where you have to spend multiple actions like evaporators or picking up boxes, things like that, where you need those actions to pick up or put damage tokens down, stuff like that.
For me, for turn 2, this is the setup where I want to remove a couple activations. I want some people to go towards the objectives, but if I can knock a couple of activations off my opponent quick and early, I will. It's a psychological edge. It is. Your opponent's like, oh, I'm down 2 or I'm down in activation before they can even move. It's also that strategic edge. If they don't have the activation to use, if it happens to be a trooper unit and they need that trooper unit to grab an objective point or to use an action, and they don't have it anymore. In my game against Brett, when I leaped over the wall with Luke, took the fleet troopers, tied them up near death. On the next turn, I'm looking at Han Solo. He's right there next to him. And of course, he tries to run with Han as best he can, but it's Luke. So Luke dragged him back towards him, got him there, punched Han in the face, and Han was dead on turn 3. Couldn't do anything else with it. Remove that activation, that psychological edge. If an objective requires troopers, blow up their troopers if you can. If your opponent doesn't have enough of them to grab all the boxes, to grab all the moisture evaporators, you can just watch him fly the AT or move the ATST around, fly the speeder bikes around, and just weep in impotent rage right there if you don't have an objective point to grab. That's my turn 2. That's what I like to do. Now, sometimes it's me falling back into position because something went terribly wrong on my side. But, that's what the turn 2 I like.
Yeah, you really want to do 2 things in my mind on turn 2. You want to claim the objectives that you set up for. Now, obviously, you're never going to get all of them on turn 2. But whatever you set up for in turn 1 with your overall plan, you want to clamp on those. Usually you want to be picking up boxes on turn 2, or actually starting to repair the moisture evaporators. Or whatever it is your objective is, breakthrough being the outlier because you only scored that at the end. But turn 2, you want to do that, and then you want to start picking your fights. By this point, if you've set up that contain well, if you're in your entrenched positions where you want them, you're going to start picking the fights that you want. And no unit, no game piece in Legion is ever safe. This is a game that's about attrition. And so you need to be aware of what you can be willing to lose. And you want to try to present that to your opponent as a strategic edge for them. If you can trick your opponent into shooting what you want them to shoot, you will get a huge edge going into the mid game. So a lot of times what I'll like to do is I'll like to posture one of my units towards an objective that I'm trying to threaten with no intention of actually devoting any more resources there. But if I can use that unit to soak up a couple of shots to trick my opponent into shooting there, then I've done my job. That's the thing I love about the flamethrower ATRT is, yes, it can do a lot of damage, but also it takes a whole lot of hate to bring down. And they can't ignore it. It's something that they see in front of them and they have to deal with it. So it just buys you time. Turn 2 is about using half your units to buy time for the other half to claim objectives and convince your opponent to play your game and not the other way around. I think after turn 2, while we have the initiative counter where, you know, who's got priority, but then there's also that initiative of who's responding to who. I think by the end of turn 2, most games have that outlined. Both players should be aware enough to know who's leading and who's following. And if you're following, you're spending the rest of the game trying to wrestle that back. Turn 2, I think, is arguably the most important turn in the game. It's either turn 2 or turn 3. But if you can play it well, claim your objectives, pick your fights, and hopefully convince your opponent to pick the fights that you want them to.
I've used a 4-man Rebel Trooper squad, and they tend to be the heroes of my game because either my opponents ignore them, which means they grab the objectives I want, or they blow them up and so take all the heat off my other guys. And I love that particular group. Rapid reinforcements is a great place. It happens at the end of round 2, but it then sets your stage for round 3 to make your opponent have to deal with something new, some new threat in their backfield. In my game against Ryan, I had a fleet trooper set that I had set aside. And so he deployed right in Ryan's backfield, and they do enough damage that Leia and Han and a set of troopers were in a bad place if they ignored them.
But let's be real, that game. Who had the better drop-ins that game, Ben?
I killed your guys who dropped in behind me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, after they reduced you to 1 model.
That's true. They did. Well, I couldn't do anything about that. That was dice. When those fleet troopers hit on all those white dice, I was like, well, I think I had to borrow white dice, and I have 6 white defense dice. But I had to borrow, I think, 2 from you to roll for that.
Yep.
That's how gross that dice roll was. But I lived on 1, and that's what made Ryan sad and salty.
Yep, it was a lot of fun.
So take a look at our Instagram, where I normally have a lot more photos. I don't know what went wrong with me that day, but I didn't take a whole lot of photos at our dice set event. But look at our Instagram. We always take pictures of the maps that we put up on tables, take pictures of great armies that we see painted. I saw some great painted models. Scott's armies always look good. The other gentleman whose name I've just forgotten, but because I only shook hands with him and get to play against him, he had a great looking Imperial army at Dice Ed. Take a look at our photos on Instagram. Follow us on our social media. Really, it's where we put some really nice stuff out there.
Yeah, we've got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We'd really love if you guys would follow us there. If you're listening to us on iTunes, we really appreciate a good rating, helps our visibility, things like that. On any platform, we are trying to keep it all the same. We are at STABcast.
You can also check us out on Teespring. We have a store where we're selling some cool t-shirts, and that's teespring.com/stores/STABcast. You can email us at swstabcast@gmail.com. We're always hungry for those listener questions or show topics or just generally what you want to hear us talk about. You guys should totally check out the Legion Discord server, and the Invader League has begun. The groups got announced probably about a week ago by the time you're listening to this. And man, US Group 3, Group of Death.
Yeah.
It's got Enemy of the Podcast Brett, myself, and Will all involved in it. And Ben's off in his own group by himself.
I am. Definitely going to be streaming those games since I'm not in the STABcast Death Pod. I'm going to take a hand at trying to set this up. We'll be casting and doing some announcing on my end, so stay tuned. I know Ryan has done this a couple times in the last season.
Yeah, hopefully Friday nights, if I can get some other people to link up with me to cast some of the other Invader League games. Friday night is really the only night that I can kind of consistently do it. So we'll see if we can make something happen. It'll be a good time. You should check out our Twitter or our Twitch at STABcast. We'd love a follow there as we get ready to start kicking that into high gear. So we want to stop down for a few minutes and talk about a tough subject, talk about a hard subject. We talked a couple weeks ago about how to build better communities. And as you start to build and grow communities, you get all sorts of people. So tonight we want to take a few minutes and talk a little bit about some uncomfortable people. We want to talk about how to deal with problem gamers, problem players. They're going to wander into your store. They're going to come into your group. How do you work with them? How do you deal with them? Who are they? What are some warning signs? And how can you use this to make your local gaming group a better place? So guys, who are some typical problem gamers that are going to wander into anybody's group?
Well, the very first one everyone always thinks of is that power gamer. They have all the things, they've invested in all the things, they've been rolling their dice consistently to find which dice hit hardest. These are the win at all costs kind of players. And even though it's casual Wednesday, and you're like, hey, listen, I want to try this new thing that's popped out. And they're going to bring tournament level game power every time. Every idea is going to be analyzed. Every thought's going to have to go through the processor of the brain. And it's just about winning, just about winning.
On the complete opposite side, you have what we kind of refer to as the Scrub Lord, which is just this player that likes to show off how bad their list is. They're like, wow, look, guys, I'm bringing this. It's so terrible. Isn't this funny? And, it's kind of wasting everyone's time because you line up against this guy and you're like, what's the point of this? Obviously this list isn't going to work. It's too silly. And not that we're against silliness. It's just that sometimes people kind of latch onto that idea and think it's the only thing they need is that you can bring just silliness, and for their own reasons, they just bring bad lists.
I think the other one that pops out to everyone, and if you've ever been to any form of convention, you've met a stanky nerd. You've met a nerd that just doesn't shower. It's a trope, it's a stereotype, but by God, is it sometimes true. They will walk into your game store. Sometimes it's because they just got off of work. They've been working hard or outside or whatever, but sometimes it's just they're just a stanky nerd, and that's something that can make them a problem player and hurt your growth of a group.
Sometimes it's that rage gamer. They cannot tolerate a loss. They cannot tolerate a bad dice roll. They can't tolerate something being a millimeter short from the measurement stick because they were sure it was going to happen. Their gaming experience is filled with nothing but rage and hate. And maybe they can keep the cussing down, but that blood pressure shot way up. And as an opponent of that, if you're trying to build a group, it's hard to want to come back and see that every casual night.
Something else that's pretty hard to deal with is the meta disciple. Now, in Legion, we haven't really had this as much, but in other games we've played, like X-Wing, and back when I used to play 40K, there were guys that had their finger on the beat of what was popular in the meta, but that was all they kind of had as their reference. They didn't have, like, squad lists they've built. It's, oh, well, this guy played this list, and this guy plays this list, and we've had these times at, especially X-Wing nights, where it's like, you'd bring a list and someone would say, oh, that's that thing that, the third place at US Nationals 2 years ago played, and you're like, I did what? They have like weird code names for lists, and you're asking what that means because you don't keep up with that stuff. It's just an issue.
Yeah, and knowing the meta isn't a bad thing, but it's if the meta is all you do. And I remember back in my X-Wing days, and I think what makes this a problem player is I had someone refuse me a game because they were playing a meta list and I wasn't. And so they didn't deem it as good enough practice or a good enough skill challenge or whatever. And so if you keep your eye on the meta, if you want to play what's competitive, that's fine, all well and good. But if you are so far into it that you can only use the slang and jargon and no one knows what you're talking about, and you can't enjoy the game for what it is, that's when it becomes a problem player. And I think the last type of problem player that we have is the toxic black hole. It's someone that's just everything's on fire. Legion's release schedule is bad and the dice are stupid and you shouldn't have to use the bag, or just every time that they could find a problem to complain about something, they find it and they bring it up. And the only way that they converse and the only way they know how to express themselves is through kind of like complaining and trying to grind the game down, that we've all come to play and have fun. So those are 6 archetypes of problem players, but we don't want to just point those problem players out. We want to kind of have a bit of a conversation on how can we as a community fix and include those different types of problem players. I'm kind of invested in this because, you know, I work in a field of mental health. Like, I want to help people. I want to help include everybody. I know Ben's a teacher, so he has to deal with getting people to cooperate and help each other out all the time. Will works at the game store, so he wants to create a better atmosphere, not just for our game, but for all the games. So how do we address these issues?
And before anyone in our local groups, we're not talking about our local group. This is our experience in gaming in general. This is experience in card gaming. This is experience in board gaming. This is experience in 40K or whatever that game that where occasionally orcs show up that Will likes to play. This is a wide variety of people who show up in your community for whatever it is you may do. Your hobby may be RC car racing, like our good friend Keith Holt. Every community has these kind of people. And yeah, as a teacher, I want to build better people. I want to build a better community. And so, that's why we're talking about this. And when you're trying to start your own Legion group, trying to start people getting together, how do you deal with these types?
And I think a lot of these same principles, like Ben was talking about, not only can span miniatures games, but also to board games, also to role-playing games. I've encountered all kinds of these types of people at conventions, at, you know, pickup game tables, for role-playing games, for all my years as a gamer. And we've done a pretty good job in Knoxville of keeping problem players at bay or finding ways to address those issues. And we've probably got one of the best local gaming communities I've ever seen that I'm really happy to be a part of. So how do we address these issues? Ben, when you identify as one of our community leaders, as our tournament organizer, when you notice one of these 6 types of problem players, what is your first go-to step? What is the first thing you do?
First thing I do is, if it's something small, if it's something that I can address. Now, from a rage gamer standpoint, I have to deal with it right then. We can't have that at a tournament. We can't have that in casual play. I'm very gentle, like, hey, buddy, let's just calm it down. We're cool. I mean, you have to have that connection. You do. You at least have to know them well enough to be like, it's not, we kind of laugh it off a little bit. And I'm one of those players. I tend to laugh things off long before I let it get to me. But you have to address rage gaming very early. You have to. You can't have that in your environment there. But for power gamers, it's a lot harder to do. So I always address a problem player a lot the same way that I address students. You got to keep them playing. They have to stay in it. You want those people to stay with you because people can change. And you really want to keep them playing and find the good parts of your game. It's about developing that relationship with human beings. And so by keeping them playing, then you can start to help address some of those ideas.
Will, what do you do when you encounter a problem player in our local game store?
I think, like Ben said, once you have that relationship built up is when you can really address these issues. And it's something I see so much at the game store. You see 2 people playing, and obviously one is just having way more of a good time than the other. You see, 2 guys playing a historical game, and one's just getting dominated, and the other one's laughing on the other side of the table while the other one's like, yeah, I guess this is fun. And once you kind of have that trust level, you can kind of address it and say, hey, man, this is a 2-way street. It's about, it's not that we both need to do well. It's that we both need to walk away saying that we've had fun with this. And once you can address that with people, I think it opens up all sorts of ways to kind of remedy the problem player situation.
I think one of the ways that people a lot of times address problem players is by trying to schedule around them or get into games before they can get there and kind of ignore them and hope they'll go away. But those are potential players that you can add to your player base that can help make your game visible. And so when you come across problem players, play games with them, invest in them, talk to them, build a relationship, build a friendship, gain a little bit of trust. And then over time, you can slowly say, hey, man, like, why don't you play with this, to your power gamer friend? Why don't you play with this new player, but maybe not break out the strong stuff? Or if you've got that scrub lord player that always just plays to lose and then blames it on the fact that they brought a silly list kind of to cover up them from their own insecurities, give them, say, hey, I've been experimenting with this list. Can you play it and give me your thoughts on it? Teach them wherever their deficiency is. Give them something to work towards. As a community leader, give them a little bit of responsibility to help bring them up. And if you've built a relationship, you've played 3 or 4 games of Legion with them, because a game of Legion is a huge time sink, a huge time investment, they'll take what you have to say seriously. And I think I've met so many gamers that just after a small relationship and a couple quick conversations, the things that could shun other players away from your group are easily fixed. Because Will said it really well. The goal of playing a game is for both people to have fun. And that's what you as a community organizer, as a leader, need to make sure at all times is happening.
And the thing about these problem players is they tend to be the extremes of these things.
Yep.
Power gamers are really good for honing skills against. They know how the game works. They know exactly what works best for balance or dice or point cost. And so they can make you and your other players better players. Your scrub lords, if they will ease off of that just a little bit and they play with the fun, at least open up your ideas of, hey, this could still work. This is a list that's interesting and different, and it's interesting. It adds nice things to it. The metal disciple, if you can get them, again, rough off some of those edges there, smooth them over a little bit to bring it back, they're great for knowledge. They listen to all the podcasts. Thank you, guys. We appreciate that. They read all the websites. They know what's going on across the country, and so they can bring that knowledge to your player group. That's a good thing. It's the extremes that are the issue.
It's honestly, it's about taking these guys' weaknesses and making them their strength. The only people you really can't do that with is the toxic players and the stanky nerds. Stanky nerds take a shower, and that's a hard one to address with people. But you just got to pull them aside after you've played a game or two with them, and they know that you're there to be their friend, and say, hey, man, this is an issue. Do you think you can, like, use some body spray before you come in after a long shift, or shower before you come to game night? Whatever it is that they need to change, just to make playing with them pleasant.
And that's a hard conversation. Ryan and I have more experience with this. He and I both work with young adults. And I probably once, twice a week, I have to have this conversation. Ryan has it a lot more than I do. It is a hard thing to address. It's like, hey, listen, buddy, you're a little strong today. Would you work hard? And if you have that trust and that relationship and you phrase it that way, you never want to be like, you there, stank cloud, get out of here. You can kind of like lead up to that idea to make them a little bit more aware of what's going on.
And the thing to keep in mind with a lot of these issues is they're always trying to look for something. Look for the underlying issues. If they're a scrub lord, they probably have a lack of confidence. And so they're trying to find something. They're trying to play intentionally bad lists or intentionally make mistakes so they can blame it on their list or blame it on the meta, the fact that they just make misplays. And so try to boost their confidence. If they're a toxic player, they probably just lack empathy, and try to start building it in with them. Look for what they're lacking, what they didn't maybe learn from other paths in their life. And hey, if they can learn something about life from a Legion table, from your gaming group, that's why we play games, is to get to know people, honestly.
Mm-hmm. That's it. Your rage gamers, a lot of times it's a lack of self-control in what's going on, but sometimes they're trying to use this game as an avenue to channel outside energy, whatever's going on with them. And so sometimes it's a nice time to have a conversation. Legion's a 2-hour game. Talk to people. Hey, what's going on with your life? Oh, I'm sad to hear that. Getting people to get past that part of it.
The only type of problem player that I would really kind of watch for, that I've had very little success turning around into a helpful member of the community, is really toxic players that can only find negative things to talk about. If you've got one of those, give them some time, but if you let them hang around too long, they'll do nothing but blast your game. And then when new players come in and they see this person as what the example of a Legion community member in your store is like, that's going to color their vision. And so if someone can only communicate by complaining and by negative emotions, play a couple games with them, try to talk to them about it, and if it doesn't change, well, then maybe it's time for a bit of the cold shoulder. But that is always a last resort. Always, always, always.
Sometimes it is just positive reinforcement. Ryan and I were joking about this earlier. I tend to just be positive just about everything. Oh, I'm just happy to be here. I've lost plenty of games that were super fun. I'm just happy to show up. And so as a leader in your community, sometimes you have to jump on that player and play them. It may not be the most fun for you, but if you want to build a larger group of people who like to come out, sometimes that means you take the toxic black hole player and you play a couple games with them and you laugh your way through it and you make it sound positive, and every negative comment that comes out, you readdress as a positive thing for this, that, or the other. Keeping that positive environment brings people back to your store. A negative experience is a negative experience, and people don't like to come out for that.
Yeah, and I will say these problem players that we're describing are super few and far between. I think a lot of people have aspects of this, but the fact to get to the point to where you're an actual problem player that you as a community leader need to step up and address is super rare. But it is something, especially as this game is growing and starting to get off the ground, that we wanted to talk about and address, because we want this to be a really positive, uplifting community where we can all get together, and every time you put Legion minis on the table in Knoxville, you can be assured that both players are going to have a good time.
And this is for those people who may not have a gaming community, and it's up to you to start it. If you want a community and there's not one around you, it's up to you to build it. So if you're struggling with that, if you're looking at ways to help you, that's what we want this to become. So with recent news that just about everything in Legion's on the boat, I think it's time to stroll down to the Imperial Corner and see what Will's excited about. Will, what's got you most excited?
Ermagerd, the Royal Girds. Yeah, these guys are going to be awesome. They've got great melee, great ranged attacks, finally giving us options that are going to change the way the game is played. I'm excited about this. It's speed 2 with charge is going to be awesome. The Imperials were not used to having fast things with beat sticks. We didn't get a Luke. It's fine. I'm just excited. I really think these guys are going to change it up.
When I saw that the article come out for this, I'm with Will. This made me want to go make sure all my Imperial stuff was painted, because these guys are going to be fantastic.
As far as their keywords, Discipline 2 seems pretty cool. We'll have to see how often it triggers. It seems pretty useful, but like the timing's a bit odd, because it's when they take the order token, they can remove 2 suppression. So they have to have 2 suppression in the order phase, and we'll see about that one. But I love Guardian with the red defense die, which lets you surge as well, so it's going to be crazy good. These guys are going to be a lot of fun.
My only fear is they have no surge capacity outside of Guardian. And so, you know me, I'll roll a surge long before I roll a hit.
Yeah, but part of that's reflected in their die pool. They have, I think it's red-black melee per model, which is going to be crazy.
So if Will's super excited about the Royal Guards, let's go talk about their counterparts that are hanging out down in the Rebel Caves. Ryan, what are you excited for?
Man, it's Wookiees. If you guys know me in real life, like, you know, I have an affinity for my fellow hairy brethren.
He is a Wookiee.
Yeah, I've been super excited for Wookiees for a while. You guys have been hearing me on the show before they were announced, making those predictions. Ben thought I was foolish. Wookiees are here, and I knew Wookiees would probably be cool. I did never imagine in a million years they were going to be this good. I'm predicting these guys to be an extremely, extremely strong unit. Clocking in at 75 points for 3 models, so that's 25 points a model, and that is a lot. But 3 health, bravery 2, and holy buckets of keywords Batman. They have charge, they have an expert climber, they have unhindered, and then this new keyword that lets them rally with red dice, meaning they're going to be really fast all the time. It is going to be absolutely insane. They roll double black in melee, white black at range. You can get a bowcaster 4th model that I'm not super sold on yet because it's pretty expensive. but you never know. It may come in handy. But these guys with tenacity, that 4-point upgrade that we're thinking lets them add a red die to their attack pool if they're wounded, is going to be bonkers. Absolute bonkers on these guys. And the Royal Guards, but these guys especially. Upgrading them to a red-black melee pool. There is a downside, though. Ben, how does it feel rolling ATRT defense dice?
Oh, yeah. Oh, look, it's a blank. Who thought that was going to happen? Also a blank. And blanked again.
Yeah, so while these guys are really strong offensive powerhouses, their defense is rather lacking. That is going to be their hang-up. That is what's going to take some experimentation. But they have a lot of cool ways to get around that. I think the Royal Guards and the Wookiees are going to change the game in a huge way by adding these huge melee components. When I can run into a group of enemy troopers and cleave them away with charge to where there's only 1 or 2 of them left, my crappy defense die doesn't feel so bad if they're only rolling 2 black dice. And then I'm safe from all ranged attacks. So they're going to be an interesting dynamic. And I think if you play Wookiees or Royal Guards, you're going to have a very unique play style that you are very much a master of this melee fighter style. It should be a lot of fun to see them on the table. I am so excited. Wookiees are going to be so cool. Like, Chewbacca's neat. Don't get me wrong. Chewbacca's cool. But these Wookiee warriors is what's got me excited, bringing lots of Wookiees. You can have up to 12 Wookiees in your army. 12.
Both of these units on rapid reinforcements is what scares me.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, terrifying.
I just need a force-sensitive Wookiee to give them force push as well, so they can pull people closer.
Please no.
The Wookiees have built-in environmental gear. They have built-in climbing gear. They don't get suppressed because they're awfully brave, and they roll a red defense die for that. I mean, they're just going to charge around.
2 training slots, meaning you can take tenacity and duck and cover if you really need it. I could also see Hunter on these guys being pretty good. But the upgrade I'm most excited to put on them actually luckily comes in the box, and it's that little compad that gives you Scout 1.
Just get them out there running early. You shoot at them. I mean, they have a white die. They do, but it takes 3 shots to kill a single unit. And if you happen to have all 4 equipped, I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot to get through. And they surge on hits too. So
yeah, they're no slouches.
You're looking at 9 or 12 damage to put the unit down, which is still more than most trooper units need.
And if you're using your melee control well, no one's going to have really great shots on you. So they're going to be fun. I'm super excited. These guys change the game. Ben, you've got this little segment that we don't know what to do with. So what are we doing in the unaligned systems?
how can you become an enemy of the podcast?
Oh, Lord.
We've talked about it a lot. Some people have asked about some rules. In fact, Jeremiah, Road Dog, was asking how he could become an enemy of the podcast. Now, despite our self-aggrandizing talk, it's not that you just defeat us. No. It takes much, much more than that to become an enemy of the podcast. Because we do lose. We lose often enough. Will and I slightly more than Ryan in this game. But in other games, Ryan loses plenty.
Yep, I'm really bad at X-Wing, y'all.
Lord knows he wants to be good at it, just not quite there yet. To become an enemy of the podcast, you have to do more than just beat us up. No. You have to throw us over the top. It's not that we get salty often, but we do get salty. For example, a player votes directly against you in a painting contest. Now, it's not that he voted for somebody else. No, that would be normal. No. He voted directly against me. In fact, it said, not Ben. That'll earn you an enemy of the podcast title. You know, a player throws all the blocks on white dice. We know no rerolls, just through 5, 6, 7 natural blocks. That could possibly earn you an enemy of the podcast if they do it multiple times. Talking to you here, Drew, talking to you. I could possibly get you an enemy of the podcast title. No. And I will say that I tend to be the one who gives out that title pretty much more often.
Ben has his list. He knows who's on it.
I do have an enemies list, and I keep it close to me in my chest pocket here. But if you manage to cross 2 of us, and that's pretty hard because we're pretty congenial people. We laugh a lot, we love a lot, we eat a lot, we enjoy ourselves when we go out and about. But if you manage to cross 2 of us, as perhaps certain scoundrels have. Well, if Will declares you an enemy of the podcast, and I declare you an enemy of the podcast, well, now that means you get upgraded to arch enemy of the podcast. It takes a special kind of terrible to become an arch enemy. But if you manage to cross all three of us, well, let's hope no one contains enough evil to become nemesis of the podcast.
So yeah, as of right now, that is impossible to do because I've handed out 0 enemy of the podcast. Ben's got 1 million and Will's got what, 2 or 3?
Just Brett and Tim right now.
Okay, Brett and Tim.
But now that we've announced that there is a third option, Brett is going to be aiming for that promotion.
Yes, he will, but he shall not have it. I'm too nice. But when Ben starts breaking down the bureaucracy of the enemy of the podcast title, I think it is time for us to call it a show. Guys, thank you for stopping by. As always, a special thanks to our producer, John Michael Gorman. Thanks you to all of our listeners. Come check out our streams on Twitch coming soon. And I am Ryan Slawoski, reminding you to take a shower.
I'm Will Heim, preparing to lose in the group stage.
And I'm Ben Fowler. I put a T-47 on the table again. God help me. Good night, everybody.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
This is Ben's talk line. Call in with your problems.
The green bothers me.